Hey guys, my name is Grant. Welcome to Apologetics 101. Today we're going to be talking about the fine-tuning argument. And no, this is not about an attractive person who makes your piano sound good. Sorry, that was a bad joke. But today, like I said, we're going to be walking through the fine-tuning argument. Again, as we've stated in both our videos on logic and reason and on the moral argument, arguments are simply organizational tools for our thoughts, so you don't need to be interested in debating or arguing for this video to apply to you or for it to help you in any way. So, unlike the moral argument, which pretty well worked off of more obvious inferences, the fine-tuning argument needs some setup. Actually, it was this argument that when I was moving away from theism and was definitely becoming more atheistic in my leanings, the thought that I'm about to present to you really challenged my assumptions about the way our reality worked and made me do actually a 180 and then eventually led me back to Christ. So I owe a lot to this thought and this argument. Basically, before that point, I lived with an assumption that I think a lot of people have, that the universe is so vast that it's almost unthinkable that a reality like ours, in which life exists, would not exist, right? So in other words, the universe is so big that of course there's life in it. But what I didn't understand is that a universe that allows for life like ours is balanced on the head of a pin. See, there are so many attributes of our reality that if they were different in even the most minute ways, nothing would exist at all, or at the very least the universe would be extremely hostile towards life of any kind. So one example of this is gravity. If gravity were, in layman's terms, weaker or stronger by a variance of just 1 in 10 to the 60th power, the universe would never have formed. Either particles would have dispersed into nothing, or everything would have collapsed in on itself. Now, I know numbers like 1 in 10 to the 60th power can be confusing, but basically it's a shorthand way to write this number here. So if gravity were weaker or stronger by adding 1 or taking away 1 from this number here, nothing would exist at all. Reasonable Faith actually has a great video on this that I'll link in the description, in which they create a visual of a dial that has 10 to the 60th units around it, and they show how small the variance would have to be for nothing to exist at all. But gravity isn't even the only example of an attribute of our universe that is so finely tuned that it seems it's impossible for it not to be on purpose. There's another number which it represents the expansion rate of the universe. So as most of us know, the universe is in a constant state of expansion. Well, if that expansion were happening any faster or slower to a degree of 1 in 10 to the 120th power, it would make the universe expand either too rapidly or too slowly, in which case life could not exist. These numbers go on and on. So in short, no, the universe is not so big that life is inevitable. In fact, it's so unlikely that life exists within our universe that in order to get around it, many atheists have proposed what they call the multiverse theory, in which they essentially posit that there must be an infinite number of universes, which makes the likelihood of having at least one which permits life slightly more plausible. So then the question becomes, if it's so unlikely that our universe permits life, then why does it? This is where we get into the argument itself. So this is the fine-tuning argument. Premise 1, the fine-tuning of the universe is due to either necessity, chance, or design. Premise number 2, it is not due to necessity or chance. Therefore, conclusion, it is due to design. So let's talk about these premises. So are there any other options besides necessity, chance, or design which would account for the existence of a life-permitting universe? No, those pretty much cover it. So then the question is, why can't it be necessity or chance? Well, it can't be necessity because things that exist necessarily are things like numbers. They didn't come into existence, they weren't invented, they don't have a reason, they didn't begin to exist at any point, they just exist necessarily. So it's like this, if you have one object and then you add to that another object. Well, you have two objects, right? There's no reason you have two objects. It's simply that's how we describe what you have. It exists necessarily. The number two exists necessarily. We know that the universe doesn't exist in this way. There is nothing that necessitates a life-permitting universe. In fact, it's far more likely that the universe would be hostile to life. So then what about chance? Well, honestly, this is a judgment call. You're free to believe that a universe that has all these incredibly finely tuned features just simply exists out of chance. But to me, it's sort of like finding a copy of Romeo and Juliet and positing that a billion monkeys were just sort of making shapes until finally this became a thing. It's unbelievably unlikely, especially when there's a much more intuitive option. So again, to go back to that idea, if you were to find a copy of Romeo and Juliet, not only would you see that it's a play, but you would see that it's in an understandable language. It has a story that is coherent. It creates characters. There are features which makes it obviously produced or designed. In that same way, when we see how astronomically unlikely our universe is, and we pair that with the fact that it functions according to discernible logic, which we call the laws of nature, it seems incredibly more likely that there is a designer at its origin. The designer of the universe is what we would call God. Psalm 19 says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims its handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge." And it seems that the knowledge that the heavens are trying to reveal to us is that God exists. Now, again, this argument doesn't get us actually any closer to the God of the Bible, or to Jesus for that matter, but it does reveal that it's far more likely that a mind created everything. In later videos, we will start talking about the idea that God is the God of the Bible or Jesus. But for now, I hope that this video was helpful, and I hope that it reveals to you that it's far more likely that God exists and created the universe. So for now, if you found this video helpful, just like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time.